Welcome to another Ocean Ideas Talk, brought to you by ocean lovers.
For our first session, I'm delighted to welcome ABC's Natasha Mitchell to introduce and host our panel of experts. Natasha.
Thank you so much, Robin. Let's give it up for Robin. And his beautiful stewardship of this wonderful talks program at this wonderful festival. Welcome to the Ocean Lovers Festival. I'm delighted to be here with the ABC. And in fact, we're recording the next few sessions, 3 sessions in a row this morning. Can't wait. So much to talk about. And today it's shark nets. What next? That's what we're going to talk about. Who's got an opinion about shark nets? Yes, I thought so. Who's seen a shark before? Brilliant. Who's seen a shark out there? Great. Well, maybe we might get some chance for questions as well. Let's hope that we do. And I want to acknowledge that we're on Gadigal land and the people of the Eora Nation have fostered a relationship with this coastline over 60,000 years. An incredible history. And we are recording today for Big Ideas, which you can find on the ABC Listen app. I'm from ABC Radio National and I'm the host of Big Ideas. This is a really timely discussion. Of course, there was the shark injury incident in Elizabeth Bay over summer, which was really interesting. Last month, it was reported that globally there's been a doubling in shark bite deaths, with 40% in Australia. That's complicated though, because when you look at the numbers, that's 10 deaths in total across the entire world. No, is that right? No, 10 deaths in total across the entire world, 4 in Australian waters. So the numbers are small. We're talking 8 billion people in this world, and a huge percentage of the Earth, 70%, is covered by oceans. So let's keep it in perspective. Of course, every loss of life is a tragedy, but I think if we do consider that 70% of the Earth is covered by sea, those numbers are low. The use of shark nets to protect us as swimmers along our shores from shark attacks or shark bites, the politics of language matters here too, as we'll find out, ignites all sorts of debate and controversy for all sorts of reasons, and that's what we're going to unpack here today. Is there good scientific evidence for the use of shark nets? Do they actually protect us? Do they protect or harm marine life? Are there alternatives we should be talking about, and what's the evidence for them? And why are sharks so political? We've got Lawrence Chlebeck, a marine ecologist whose work with Humane Society International is focused on marine campaigns around shark welfare and protection, connecting wildlife, the ocean and the public in all sorts of ways. Thanks for being here, Lawrence. We've got Stephen Pearce over at the other end there, Chief Executive Officer of Surf Life Saving New South Wales, that organisation that keeps you safe along this very beautiful beach of yours. The peak body for coastal aquatic rescue in New South Wales. And Steve brings a 3-decade history in emergency and crisis management, as you would need in your role, across Fire Rescue New South Wales and New South Wales State Emergency Service. It's really fantastic you've given up your Sunday to be here as well. Dr. Chris Pepin-Neff, he did a really interesting PhD. It's the first ever PhD on the politics of shark attacks. And they are a senior lecturer in public policy at the University of Sydney and the author of a book called Flaws, Shark Bites and Emotional Public Policy Making. Thanks, Chris, for being here. Dr. Chris. Hannah Tait is the CEO of Action for Dolphins. You might have seen Hannah speak yesterday on a panel here. A marine conservation organisation spearheading campaigns dedicated to protecting dolphins in their ocean home. But once you protect dolphins, you're protecting all living species in the sea too. Thanks for being here, Hannah. Let's give them a warm welcome. Quick question to get you all warmed up on this Sunday morning. Why does this matter? Why does this issue of shark nets matter to you? Steve?
You had to start with me, did you? So,
yeah, go on.
Well, obviously, Surf Life Saving, we've around 78,000 volunteers, and at any one time we have around 21,000 volunteers in the water, so frontline lifesavers. The ocean is basically our workplace. We have an obligation for our work and safety for our lifesavers, but also for the overall community and public. And unfortunately, 90% of the time, lifesavers or surf lifesaving are the first on the scene for any shark interaction. and we actually have a really significant play in the shark management strategy in New South Wales. So it is it's always of interest. I know it's extremely contentious, the issue of nets, and we get drawn into this quite continuously, and we'll just see how this conversation plays out anyhow.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I look forward to hearing about the drone program that you help manage. Hannah Tait, what about you? Why does this issue of shark nets matter to you?
Yeah, well, I'm here and I care.
That mic's not on. Let's just see.
swapsy.
We'll swap it out and maybe touch the base to see if it turns on.
All right, I'll talk through this one. So I'm here and I care about this issue because shark nets kill dolphins. And we sort of joke that dolphins are our gateway animal into caring about the marine life more generally and the oceans more generally. And it's not just dolphins, it's turtles and rays and other types of sharks that are killed in shark nets. So that's why I'm here to talk about that, and that's why I care about this issue.
Thanks, Hannah. Chris?
Hello. I care about this because I think we should be protecting people from sharks. And shark nets corrode the relationship between the public and government because shark nets don't work. They're a lie. And when you provide people with a false sense of security and then tell them that you're making them safe, you are undermining their trust in government. And no good can come from it. We were talking just a second ago about the tragedies that happen when people are lost. And then when you introduce government to that, you take a tragedy and you make it worse. So I'm in this for the people.
Shark nets are alive. There's your provocation for the next hour, folks. If you bring that mic up a little bit closer when you speak, that'd be great. Lawrence Chlebeck, what about you? Humane Society International, why do you care about the issue of shark nets?
Yeah, well, we are a animal welfare and conservation organization, and I think obviously our interest in this program began with its impact on wildlife, and I think Chris hit the nail on the head just now when he said it erodes the relationship between the public and the government, but it also erodes the relationship we have with the ocean. It's not just the simple numbers of animals that are taken, and I can list off all kinds of statistics, but it's about how we interact with the environment around us. We all know that our world is facing all kinds of different issues, and shark nets might be pretty low on that list as far as its scope of impact on wildlife around the world, but it's indicative of the relationship we have with the world that we live in. And if this is our approach to reducing the risk of shark bite, that speaks to a breakdown of a relationship between public and the natural world.
Okay, lots to unpack there. Excellent. Thank you for those opening ideas. Chris Pepin-Neff, you did your PhD on the politics of shark attacks. Why are sharks and shark bites, shark attacks, the language does matter, so political?
So, is that all right?
Yep.
So in Australia, I just think it's important for all of us to be aware that for the first 30 years, when sharks bit people, they were called shark accidents. Here in Bondi, in 1920, 1930, they're all called shark accidents. But there was a competition, sort of a conversation that was going on between two different academic researchers, and they started to propose shark attack as the leading frame for how to talk about it, because the idea was that sharks don't just attack, that these are rogue sharks, right? It's not the whole species of sharks, it's just these problematic ones. And so it's really important to identify them as shark attacks, because the shark is hunting the person, and until you kill the individual shark responsible, hello South Australia, then it won't work. So shark attack was used originally as something that followed shark accident as a way to try to explain shark behavior by saying that it was intentional.
What legacy has the film Jaws have? And I don't mean that as a joke question. That film came out 50 years ago. Does its legacy live on in terms of how we think about sharks and their relationship to us?
The Eyre Peninsula has a motion sitting before it, right, in South Australia, to kill the shark responsible. They want to do a 48-hour drum line that will just go off. This is over by Elliston.
So just explain what a drum line is.
So a drum line is a baited hook. So it's buoyed at the surface of the water, and then they put like a tuna head or something on the line, and it's designed to kill, in this case, great white sharks. So they want to just set up this drum line off the coast Not because it bit anyone, but because the theory is that maybe you'll catch the one responsible and we'll kill that one. So they want to set up a 48-hour drumline to catch the shark responsible, and that was 2 Fridays ago on the Eyre Peninsula.
Why do we use shark nets, Chris? What's the evidence for their use?
So
2 questions there.
if you asked the New South Wales, I'm going to give the New South Wales government's response. The New South Wales government would say, we don't know why they work, but we know that they do. That's the New South Wales government's official response. Their position is, we couldn't point to a scientific causal study that proves that they work, but they do seem to work, so we're going to keep them until we find something better, right? The perfect zero-risk model. So the answer is, to the question is, that it's a placebo effect, that the sharks, sorry to talk about this, but the sharks are the politicians, not the fish, right? So who does the shark net protect? The politician. 40% of sharks that are caught in the shark net are caught on the swimmer side trying to get out. In Durban, they did a study and found 30% of the sharks on their shark nets are on the inside trying to get out.
So they're not a complete barrier.
They're not. They're open on the top, they're open on the bottom, and they're open on the sides. But other than that, it's a complete barrier.
But over the last 70... but if you look at the data, there's only been 1 fatal shark attack in a netted beach for the last 70 years. That's significant, and that's the data that the government points to in New South Wales.
Right. It's misleading because the number about 3/4 of the time there's a shark bite in New South Wales, there's net in the water. So in Avalon, there was a net in the water in 2009. In Bondi, when Glen Orgeus was bitten in 2009, there was a net in the water. So the nets are in the water. Like the idea that what is better now than it was 30 years ago when you had shark bite fatalities is penicillin, first aid response, better wetsuits, having first aid care. All of these things are better. It's not that that the nets are magically working.
So there are 51 nets across New South Wales beaches. Is the only measure a reduced incidence in encounters with sharks of their success? Is that the only measure of their success?
Well, it's a little bit tricky, right? Because in New South Wales, in their 2009 shark meshing report, the state government put out 40% of reported shark attacks had no injury at all. The shark never touched the person. But it was marauding. It was swimming around the way fish are known to maraud through the water. And so the whole thing sits on this very fragile house of cards that the parliament and the politicians are trying to consistently redeploy, build up.
Stephen Pearce from Surf Life Saving New South Wales, how do you see shark nets playing a role in the work that you and your colleagues do to protect swimmers along New South Wales beaches?
So I'm going to be a splinter on this occasion. So our position would be that anything that can be introduced or can mitigate an interaction with sharks for swimmers, we would support. So obviously, to Dr. Chris's points there, shark nets are up and down the coastline, but it's only one component of the whole shark management strategy. And so we've seen the introduction of technology, and it's a plug more for us. We can talk about it later, but there are greater uses of technology, I think, nowadays, to surveil for sharks and warn for sharks as well. And New South Wales, I think, are the leaders in this space nationally at the moment. And I think that's a thing that the New South Wales government and the Department of Prime Industries should be incredibly proud of. But to the point, we have shark encounters continuously, in our line of work. So we always get reports of shark sightings or shark movements. I myself, I'm a volunteer lifesaver as well down at Stanwell Park, and only three weeks ago we had a 3-metre juvenile white swim through our flags. But we knew that because we had our drones up and we were actually surveilling the shark when it entered the beach, and we monitored the shark all the way through the beach and when it went around into the headlands. So they're always there. It's just that we see them more now because we're actually looking for them.
Yeah, interesting. And I'll come to the drone program because lots of interesting questions to ask about how that works and how you run that. Lawrence Chlebeck from Humane Society International, tell us about the behaviour of sharks and why shark bites of humans happen.
Right. Yeah, this is a great question, and one we get a lot. And Chris was getting close to answering this one when he was talking about his response to Jaws and talking about South Australia and believing in a rogue shark theory that they're hunting us. Their waters are shark infested, and Steve also touched on this too. We're seeing a lot more sharks now because we're looking a lot more. So sharks' behavior is just doing its thing out in the ocean, and 99 times out of 100. A bite is what we call exploratory. It's not necessarily an accident, but it's when
exploratory bite.
Exploratory, and yes,
that's interesting language, isn't it?
It can obviously be very traumatic for people, and that's why we do work to reduce the risk. But from a shark's point of view, it happens in times of low light, high water turbidity after heavy rains. These are all higher risk kind of situations because the shark can't see. The shark can't smell as good as normal, and so it relies on its sense of taste. And so a lot of these bites are opportunistic, they're exploratory. Very, very rarely does a shark go back for a second bite. I mean, obviously I said some of these can be very traumatic and end up pretty poorly for the individual involved, but 99 times out of 100, this shark is just trying to figure out what's in the water next to it.
So it's not predatory, because what's interesting is when you look at the data on shark bites across the world, there's that distinction between unprovoked and provoked as well, isn't there?
That's right, and that's why we don't count things like a fisherman hauling a shark up into his boat and getting bit on the hand. That's obviously a provoked interaction. But yeah, so these unprovoked interactions are, like I said, 99 times out of 100, probably even more than that, this exploratory situation, and it's almost never a predatory act, which again speaks to what Chris was talking about, why it's so important we use the correct terminology when these things happen.
Hannah Tait, CEO of Action for Dolphins, let's come to you about the impact of shark nets, as you understand it, on marine life and particularly sharks.
Yeah, so 89% of the animals that were caught in the last season in New South Wales shark meshing program were the non-target species. So they weren't a bull, a tiger, or a white shark. They were dolphins, they were rays, they were turtles, and they were other types of sharks like our critically endangered grey nurse shark. So I think keeping those statistics in mind, that like Chris said, not only are the sharks that they're catching swimming back out to sea, but majority of what they're catching, I think since 2012 to 2022, it was 92% of what they caught were our beloved marine species that we go out onto the ocean and we see dolphins playing in the waves and we see turtles if we're snorkeling, if we're lucky enough. That's what's getting caught in shark nets.
So is that being measured? Who's actually quantifying what gets caught in those meshes, those nets?
It's the Department of Primary Industries. They release their annual report every year. So at the moment, we're not sure what's being caught. And then in July, when the annual report comes out, we'll see the statistics.
So tell us about what you understand the interaction is between sharks and nets. For example, the nets in New South Wales, as I understand it, have whale alarms on them, have pingers on them, as an attempt to try and prevent species from getting entangled in the nets.
Sure, so I can talk to the dolphin pingers, but clearly they're not working because just last week a dolphin was caught up in a net in Thirroul, and I'm not sure if anyone's seen the footage, but it's pretty horrible because when an animal gets caught up in a net, it essentially drowns in its own home. And you can see the struggle that that animal has been through as it's drowning and trying to escape and just getting further and further wrapped up in the net. So it's all well and good to say we have these pingers that could be stopping dolphins from getting caught, but the reality is they're still getting caught, and we've seen the footage of that.
Does it matter what type of net or barrier is used? Are there alternatives to consider there?
Yeah, there are alternatives. There are barriers which we were talking about earlier, trialled over in in Western Australia, sorry. But we also have other completely non-invasive.
Tell us about those.
The barriers?
Yeah.
So they're enclosed and they're made of plastic so that things, marine life and other animals can't get caught up in them. But they are trialled in New South Wales. They're trialled in Western Australia, not so much in New South Wales because of the conditions here.
And how do they work? Are they better than nets?
Well, yeah, they're better than nets because they actually protect swimmers and people who are using the beach, and they're not killing marine life.
Do they have limitations? I mean, I think we were talking about them breaking up in the sea. Is that right?
Yeah, and they're condition dependent. So when you've got the deep water and storm affected areas like here in New South Wales, the barriers they're not able to be put into the water basically because they will break up. But there are other technologies that are already being used really effectively here in New South Wales. Definitely keen to hear from Steve about the drones and how they work. But we've also got shark listening stations, which work in conjunction with shark tagging programs. You've also got education, so people learning about what to look out for when they're choosing to go and swim in the ocean, and the shark listening stations are connected to the Shark Smart app, so people get alert in real time when they're going, if they're considering going into the ocean, if there's been a large shark tagged and alerted in that area.
What's a shark listening station? How does that work?
Yeah, so you can actually see one off Bondi. They're sort of a floating buoy, and if there's a shark that has been tagged within 500 metres, it'll send out an alert. So they work particularly well with a good shark tagging program in place, which they have in Western Australia, a really good scientific shark tagging program.
Steve Pearce.
Yeah, look, I'll jump on those because that's one thing that we see in practice, and I guess personally, and I didn't really want to put a personal opinion out here, but the smart drum lines and the VR4G listening stations is exactly what you're talking about. I think they're a really positive measure, and I've seen them in action. And as Hannah said, you'll see the yellow buoys up there, and what occurs is these hooks are baited. They're a hook that can be released the shark really quickly. As soon as a shark takes the bait, it activates a signal. It gets a contractor out there, and the contractor has to be there within 20 minutes, so the animal isn't distressed as much as what it could be.
So this is night and day?
This is night and day, and they'll get out there.
Do they get out there within 20 minutes?
Yeah, the majority of the times, yes. So, and again, it's weather dependent. They get out there, they retrieve the fish. The way they do it actually, and so it's quite unique. Turn the fish on its back and it puts it to sleep. They'll tag it, and then they'll tow the fish out to sea and release. Now, we see these scattered up and down the coastline now, and Dr. Chris probably be interested in your opinion, but it's more also about the psychology of people seeing these things out there, thinking there's a comfort and there's actually something there, but the app is really good as well. So we obviously utilise the apps, but the app's only as good as how many sharks are tagged. And
yeah. But drones, Lawrence.
Oh yeah, if I could just say something quickly about those smart drum lines. Steve's absolutely right, and when he did mention earlier that New South Wales is truly a world leader in implementing some of these new technologies. In my role for an animal welfare organization, we're not completely comfortable with baited hooks off of our beaches that are the smart drum lines. But I will say that when you compare them to nets, and if we were proposed, would we like to replace the nets with some smart drum lines, my organization would say absolutely yes, because they're so much less of a wildlife impact. In a decade of trials, there's maybe been 2 or 3 shark deaths on smart drum lines versus 4,000 wildlife killed in nets in the same time period. So when you balance 3 sharks to 4,000 turtles, dolphins, all kinds of sharks.
Where's that data come from?
That's from the Department of Primary Industries itself. So we would say we would absolutely take that. And Steve makes a great point that this room excluded, and people like you, but a lot of the public do want something out there to see that they're visually protected. So if we're making compromises and we want to take steps in the right direction, we would see smart drum lines as a positive step.
Okay, I'll come back to drones in a moment, but Chris Pepin-Neff, just talk about the psychology of shark nets, given that they are one of the primary tools being used by, say, the New South Wales Government? What's the psychology around them in terms of how we think about our safety? That's a really interesting question, isn't it?
It's a great question, and it's one of the reasons I brought Flipper today.
So Flipper, just for the listening audience as well as those in the room, is a big stuffed animal with a net around it.
Yes, a stuffed great white shark with a net around it. And this is part of the deal, right? So killing sharks is good business for politicians. So shark nets and being able to, like, there's no penalty, right? We talk about dolphins and we talk about sea turtles, and people care about those. But then they say, no one's going to say you killed too many great white sharks off the coast of my nippers going in the water, right, on Sunday morning. So nippers are, so there is a psychology around both the introduction of an invisible tool that invisibly kills sharks that we don't want there anyway. And I struggle with it, because the nets don't work. So I'll use 2009. In 2009, when there was the Summer of the Shark, New South Wales Primary Industries put out a statement that said that the psychological effect of the nets was because the sharks swim by the nets, know that they're there, and learn to stay away. So that was the official position of New South Wales Primary Industries. So
are we also lulled into a false sense of comfort?
Completely.
So we're not educating ourselves about what to do in relation to shark encounters as we might.
That's correct. And when shark nets were first put in 1937, the concept was the statement that was written by Adrian Kerr-Lewis, the longest-serving president of Surf Life Saving Australia, said that nets were being put in to address, quote-unquote, a fear complex. And that had developed in New South Wales. That it was the idea that Australia is born of the beach, and it's the birthright of Australians to swim in the ocean, and sharks are a national security threat to the Australian identity, and therefore killing more sharks helps boost Australia and makes Australia proud.
You point to a very interesting disconnect between those of us who might sign a petition against, say, culling of sharks for shark fin soup, and yet we wouldn't do the same to prevent the culling of sharks to protect our kids at the beach. And that's an interesting disconnect, but those are quite different issues, it seems to me.
They are. It's very tricky. When we talk about all the technologies, whether it's drum lines, which I personally happen to support, but I think it's complex, or drones or in-water arrays, here's the problem. There is no technological solution to Mother Nature. If you think there is, Mother Nature will prove you wrong every single time. So when we set ourselves up and we build an expectation that the beach, this wild dynamic ecosystem, can be tamed or can be mitigated, right? That's sort of the political way that we escape the word domesticated. We say mitigated. So we're going to mitigate the risk that beachgoers and surfers and tourists, who we really care about, these identities that are of value to us, that when we're going to mitigate those by pretending this mass delusion that the beach is not a dynamic ocean ecosystem that cannot be mastered by anything we do, right? That when a land animal goes in the ocean, they should be shocked to bump into a fish. And I think we need to seriously reconsider it. And I've got to say that Surf Life Saving Australia has done a remarkable job, particularly around drownings, making sure people are aware that they take personal responsibility for themselves when they go into the wild ocean ecosystem. And I think the same, it's not politically great, but it's certainly true that there's no decision a government can make that will stop a shark from biting you.
Hannah Tait, education's a big part of your mission. What sort of education do you want to see as a CEO of Action for Dolphins?
Yeah, I think education, like Chris was saying, is such a key, solution here. Remove the nets and increase education around shark safety. So we're learnt from primary school how to look out for rips, how to be safe around currents and around the ocean. And I know Steve can probably speak to this as well, but less so about what to look out for to be shark smart and to be shark safe. And I think it goes to Chris's point of people taking personal responsibility for going and swimming in the ocean and interacting with marine life. It would be fantastic if there was much more of an emphasis from the government on that personal responsibility and educating the public to feel that way.
Lawrence Chlebeck, what sort of education do you want to see? Let's get specific here. What do we need to know about sharks and shark behaviour in relation to our own engagement with the beautiful seas here?
Yeah, it's like Chris was saying, there's no way to completely eliminate the risk of shark bite if you're going to enter, unless you just choose to not enter the ocean or use ocean pools. So there is certain steps that we can all take, helping the public understand when's a good time to get in the ocean and a good place and time and when is not. And we can look for those red flags. As I was said earlier, after heavy rains, at dawn, at dusk, at night, not great times to enter the ocean if you want to reduce your own risk as much as possible.
And if you are out there and you do encounter a shark?
Yeah, those are a little bit more nuanced, and I would share those with
Get nuanced for us. We've got
with,
time.
all right.
This is important.
with very experienced ocean people. Don't panic. Look at the shark in the face. I worked on boats for a long time in Hawaii where there was a lot of tiger sharks, and I was told by some of the old spearfishers there, tiger sharks are big and lazy, and they're only going to bite something if it's not paying attention or if it's wounded. So if you see a big tiger out on the water, just stare right back at them. Because
So I just want to survey the room here. In the moment, out there, in your togs, having a nice time, would you feel able to stare in the face of a shark? There's a nodding in all directions. Yeah, it's an interesting proposition, isn't it? Because adrenaline kicks in at that point.
It does, and we still have the brain of people living in caves and hunting and gathering. It really hasn't.
And get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and we weren't created to be in the ocean. Quite clearly, how much energy it takes us to move so much slower than any other animal in the water. So it's so important that our logical side of our brain takes over that lizard brain and thinks about what we're doing in the water and acting appropriately.
Good luck with that project. Stephen Pearce from Surf Life Saving New South Wales. Okay, so we're in the water and you're there to protect us in the water. Let's talk about that. One, what do you recommend people do if they have an encounter with a shark? What do you do when you have an encounter with a shark? And then we'll come to drones.
Well, Natasha, just to clarify, we're not there to protect everyone from shark attacks. So, but we are there just to try and reduce and mitigate the instance of drowning. So, safest place to swim if you don't want to encounter a shark is in the flags. The reason I say that with all seriousness is that's the most highly surveilled area. So, if there is going to be any encounter within a flags, we'll spot it normally, pretty quickly. So.
Okay, so you're using drones to spot.
Yep.
Tell us about the drones program and how it works, how it's operated, and how effective it is in your mind.
I'll answer that last other question that Lawrence was talking about stirring them down. If I encountered a shark in the water, and I've encountered a couple, I just get the hell out of there. I'm not staring at it. I'm just swimming. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get away from it.
Lawrence? That's the head of Surf Life Saving New South Wales.
Sorry,
He's
Lawrence.
swimming for his life.
Yep, I'm not that brave. So the drone program. So for those who are unaware, so Surf Life Saving New South Wales, we actually work really closely with the New South Wales Government through the Department of Prime Industries. So we're not a government agency, we're a not-for-profit, so I'm not here advocating or supporting or talking on behalf of New South Wales Government.
Sure, thanks for making that clear.
I just wanted to put that out there. So, But what we do, we run the largest shark surveillance UAV program in Australasia.
So UAV?
UAV drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. So it started after a whole spate of shark attacks up around Ballina and quite a few fatal fatalities that occurred out of that. And we trialled the use of 4 UAVs, 4 drones up there. Bring it forward now. So now we fly at 50 designated locations that the Department of Prime Ministry has asked us to fly, and that's because of shark behaviour, the incidence of sharks, their migrational observations or whatever. We have around, it's about 400 licensed drone pilots, so we have to register as an airline. So we're like, we sit with Qantas and Jetstar, we register as an airline. We have 300 UAVs or drones, some they call sub 2 kilo, about this big, and some really big ones. The drones have some great technology, so at these 50 locations, they fly in designated periods. So in the last financial year, just to give you some statistics, so we did just over 12,000 flights of the drones. Now, before drones, they were helicopters. And I can explain the nuance and the benefits environmentally about the drones.
Yeah.
But then out of that, so that's 9,000 hours in the air surveilling for a shark. So, and they will fly all day. So they fly, drop down, recharge batteries, go back up again.
And you've got people in surf life-saving gear, yellow and red outfits.
So this comes
driving
back,
them, because drones at the beach are a bit creepy.
Well, actually, and so here's the thing.
Like,
so we've done some surveys.
You don't really want a drone spying on you, really.
Well, there's a bit of a fallacy around that. So
okay, good.
Dr.
Unpack
Chris
that.
talks about the psychology. So we fly, our pilots are in red and yellow, so they look like lifesavers and lifeguards. The drones are all red and yellow, so they're all skinned red and yellow. So when you see them, they're surf lifesaving drones. The drones cannot fly over the beach.
Okay.
They are not allowed under CASA regulations to fly over a beach. So, no, they can't take pictures and photos of any attractive men and women on the sand. They fly straight out to sea and then they scan. The drones have great technology. They have infrared technology. We have to fly at a certain height. But what happens is when the drone flies, and our pilots are trained to identify sharks, target species sharks. So whites, tigers, bulls. They're also trained on how to identify the behaviour of sharks. So, whether the shark's acting in an aggressive nature. So the pilots will fly and watch, and we record this all of a sudden, all the time. They have the radio communications. As soon as they see a shark, a target species shark, they'll notify the lifeguards or the patrol that's on the sand to say, you have a shark in your vicinity coming in.
Yeah.
They also monitor the Shark Smart app. So if they get a ping on the Shark Smart app, they'll launch and they'll fly within that 500-metre radius to try and identify the shark. Now, the beauty of this is that when you think, oh, you're going to see more sharks, you're going to shut more beaches. Statistically, since we've flown the drones, we shut far less beaches than we have ever shut because we're able to see the shark, watch the shark, monitor the shark out of the area, and then off it goes.
At what point do you make a decision to go, okay, everyone, get out of the water?
Well, if it's a big one, if it's a target shark, 9 times out of 10, the lifeguards or the lifesavers will activate the shark alarm just to clear people if it's in close vicinity going past. So, as I said, we normally see on average around 220 sharks a year. So in the scheme of things, and you remember this is from Queensland to Victoria. This is the entire coastland. So in all that time that we fly, statistically we only saw last year 220 sharks. So it's what I love about the drone program, apart from the fact that we get to claim it to say we're the biggest and the best. Every other state tries to emulate this, and South Australia, Western Australia try and do it, but they can't do it on the mass that we do. But environmentally, so when the drone flies, it flies and it can stop at any time and hover and look and spot. Historically, the helicopters or the shark spotted planes would just fly past the beach and they'd fly over an area for 2 seconds and keep on going. Whereas we stay in that one vicinity all the time. And again, you said, oh, it's a bit creepy. We did a survey because we were really interested about the public perception and appetite of drones flying around, and it was a 98 percentile of confidence knowing that lifesavers and lifeguards were flying the drones because they're rated as trustworthy, with doctors and RSPCA people. But to see the red and yellow, it was just another aspect of I guess, water safety.
So that's one drone per maybe urban beach, is it?
Well,
because are you confident that you're going to be catching all sharks that approximate?
So that's 50 DPI identified locations. Then we have all our other surf clubs that fly drones.
Okay.
And then we have roving, what they call support operations. And so here today, I saw one before I walked in. You'll see the vehicles pull up. We'll throw the drone up when there's a big crowd of people and have a look around as well.
Okay, Chris Pepin-Neff, drones, are they the solution that we're looking for here? Could you imagine the government saying, okay, we don't need nets anymore, we can use drones? Recently, the New South Wales Premier said, look, the evidence for other possible solutions for this are just not baked enough, not developed enough for me to let go of the netting program in this state. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, I'm not the Premier, but clearly the Premier and his department wants to hang on to the nets. That's the reasoning that he's given, that the alternative solutions really aren't sufficient yet.
Yeah, I mean, so, okay, can we just get real for a second? So,
We've been pretty real.
I think we have been real. but when we're talking about, again, just the same point about technology, right? When humans think they've mastered the ocean, it's usually on the precipice of catastrophe, right? That we go overboard. So, for instance, drones. So they are better than helicopters, which have a 14%, according to DPI, a spot rate, right? So 86% of the time, the shark was there and the helicopter never saw it, okay? So they only had a 14% success rate. Drones are better, they're cheaper, they don't need to be refueled like planes do, they can stay in that area, but they are dependent upon the weather conditions, the ocean conditions, the shark behavior. Is it big enough? Is it at the surface? There are lots of variables that go into play in whether or not a drone will spot a shark. And so, again, I don't want to provide a false sense of security by saying that drones will spot all the sharks. And if I can just note one other thing, the pingers, we were talking about the tagged sharks and the 500-meter radius. So sharks swim quite quickly through the ocean that they belong to. So when it pings the thing, it could be 500 meters closer to you than you think it is when you open your app. So it's just important to recognize that the app system is not a shark bite prevention system.
Yeah, I wondered about that, about the timing of all this. You see a shark on a drone, at what point do you make a decision to warn people if it's moving through the water really fast?
Well, again, the beauty of having the UAVs or the drones is you can actually monitor them. And case in point, the other week when I was on the beach, our drone pilot just monitored the shark. We obviously cleared the flags because the shark had priority to go through the flags, and but we watched it all the way around the headland. But have to be really just clear here. Like, I really support and advocate drones because I see the advantages. But drones or UAVs will not stop a shark interaction. It gives you the greatest opportunity to surveil and identify. And when we talk about the technology, just one, and I didn't want to correct you here on this one, Chris, but we actually have drones that fly in all weather, so we fly anytime. And the other issue is the drones are fitted with speakers. So here's the thing, if you're in the water and a drone starts to hover above you and you hear the pilot starting to talk to you, he's not saying good morning. I would be a little bit worried, but they're trained to warn the surfers and the swimmers, and the majority of the times it's actually surfers. So we go and patrol a lot of surfing competitions and things like this as well. But they'll just say, look, there's a marine creature in the vicinity. They don't want to talk about saying, look, there's a 4 metre white coming around, and they give the warning and they move away. So it's people think that if there's a UAV or a drone, there will be no shark interaction, but that's not the case. But it gives you a great opportunity to identify. So
it's back to that question about our psychology, about risk and our relationship to risk.
Yeah, and just to your point, Steve, so I wasn't saying that drones can't fly when it's windy. I was saying drones can't see sharks when the sun's not out.
Yeah,
That weather is really dependent on that. And it is, I mean, we talk about like human-shark conflicts. Sharks aren't having a conflict. They're exploring, they're swimming, they're where they belong. We are, we're talking about unprovoked or provoked. For a shark, when we are very big, when a very big land animal flops into the ocean and lets everyone in town know that it's there, it attracts things. Things come and see what's going on. And so I support drones and I support smart drum lines because those are actually reasonable approaches. But it all comes with a grain of sea salt.
A grain of sea salt. Lawrence Chlebeck, let's bring it back to the shark and to sharks. Why is this such an important conversation to have in terms of the survival of sharks right now in the world? What is the plight of different species of sharks?
Yeah, so globally, sharks are in decline. I think that kind of goes without saying. I think most people in this room would understand that. Most of that comes from commercial fishing. A lot of it's from, then there's uncertain effects due to climate change. What we're eating the food that they are looking for, and all kinds of things like that. Shark finning, we touched on that as well. So sharks are in decline around the world, and they are they're critical cogs for our marine ecosystems. They're what we call meso, which is the middle, to apex predators. They're the ones that really keep the food chain in balance. They manage each of the populations of fish and crustaceans and whatever else below them, and really, because they're at the tops of the food chain, if we remove them, that food chain gets all out of balance. We're seeing this in coral reefs around the world. A recent study done a few years ago found that 90% of the world's coral reefs do not have an ecologically functional population of sharks on them any longer. And so these are the things that lead to ecosystem collapse. And while our ocean is facing all these other threats from warming temperatures, ocean acidification, plastic pollution, chemical pollution, all of these things, we are so reliant on healthy ecosystems to build that resilience. Because the ocean is going to change in ways that we don't know and that we cannot predict. So the best thing we can do is keep those ecosystems as close as they are to a baseline as possible to build that resilience.
What does ecosystem collapse look like, and what impact could it have on our lives?
Well, Natasha, the scary thing is we don't know exactly. It could look like a lot of different things, but for us specifically, it could mean that we have harmful algal blooms that prohibit anyone from entering the water without getting sick. It could pollute our air. I mean, we talk about trees and how wonderful they are at oxygen producing, but it's phytoplankton that produces about 90% of the world's oxygen. So if ocean ecosystems collapse and we lose phytoplankton, that could be a huge problem for all of us land animals. There's all kinds of other things that could happen. So the relationship we have with the ocean goes beyond just being kind and being nice. This is also a conversation about self-preservation.
Mm. Hannah Tait, do you see shark nets being removed anytime soon, given that we've struggled to really unpack this relationship we have to risk and sharks in the popular and public mind and the political mind?
Yeah, and on that point in the discussion around drones and shark tagging, I think it's important to note that there's not a silver bullet solution. There's this one thing that we can use that's, as Chris says, going to protect everyone from ever encountering a shark. But what we can do and what is already present here in New South Wales, what's already being used, is an effective shark management strategy that has drones, that has shark tagging, that has an education program, and also personal deterrent devices and people accepting the risk of going into the ocean. What's not included in that effective shark management strategy is shark nets. So yes, I do think we should see shark nets and can see shark nets removed. What we need is the political will to do so. We've already talked up here about how they're not effective at keeping people who are using the ocean safe. We've got these other measures that are already being used. We just need the government to make that call. Let's remove the nets. Let's protect marine life properly. Let's protect people who are using the ocean properly.
Lawrence, do you have anything to add?
Oh, no, that was great, Hannah. And she's absolutely right. When we talk about all these alternatives, smart drumlines, drone surveillance, education, not only are these things more effective at reducing the risk, it's also about that wildlife cost. And she's absolutely right. We just lack a political will. These politicians are afraid for their jobs, and they're afraid for backlash. And I think that's why it's so great, the work that Dr. Chris has been doing on looking at some of the social science around removing nets that I know that he would love a chance to speak on.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you about that too, and where you see political will shifting? Because clearly communities do have an impact on the politics of the day. We do change our relationship to risk, and politicians reflect that change back at us through their policy making. So what do you see could happen?
Traditionally, internationally, use Durban, South Africa as an example. So they had bigger nets than we have in New South Wales, and they introduced more smart drum lines. They introduced, I think, 3 smart drum lines for every net. And they caught the same amount of sharks, but there's a cap. So drum lines have what's called a C hook on it, which is specifically for shark jaws, not for dolphins, and it has a little hoodie that keeps dolphins away. So you didn't catch nearly as much wildlife, but you caught just as many sharks, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's what it did, and they saw it as helpful. So they've taken out a lot of the nets in Durban and in South Africa.
And this is recently?
This is recently. This
Very
is over the last 10
interesting to
years.
hear recent situation, yeah.
And so, anyway, so there can be political solutions to it. I think the tricky bit is that the MIN's government is not really listening to the science. I did a survey in Waverley, right? So what was it? April of last year. And we asked 600 Waverley electorate people. So it wasn't a small sample, it wasn't 25, it was 600. And we said, if we took shark nets out of Bondi and there was a fatal shark attack at Bondi, would you blame the New South Wales government? And 71% of people said no. So, but I don't believe that politicians believe the polls. I think that for an Australian politician to take shark nets out of the water, they're demonstrating that there is a higher threshold than 71% of people, which we could survey this room on the colors of the sky and we wouldn't get 71%.
We've just got a few more really interesting discussions. Probably raised all sorts of issues for you. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone's got a burning question they'd like to ask, I'll come to you with my mic and hang on to it, and you can ask the question. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to ask, what's the mortality rate post-release from the smart drum lines? Like, if only two sharks have died on the drum lines, but catch and release, they generally don't survive too long afterwards a lot of the time.
Thanks.
Yeah, so all the target species of shark that are caught on smart drumlines, the bull, the whites, and the tigers, they are fitted with the GPS tag, so those sharks can be tracked. And they found for at least 90 days, they stay far offshore. So if your goal is to deter sharks from being at the beach, their smart drumlines are actually pretty effective. And they can also tell when of those animals have died. And since they tag only the largest, most robust individuals, they do have a high survival rate. In fact, 98%.
We've got a question here.
Yeah, hi, my name's Patricia Jenkins. I've got the deepest respect for the oceans. My question is, you talk about the government don't have an alternative. How do you see with the changes when you're saying you're not sure what's going to happen? You can't beat nature, I appreciate that. But how about the adverse impact of climate change, the warming of temperatures? For people, for example, there is a group, people that swim marathon swimming. There mightn't be a lot, but they go out and swim out around islands here, and there are sharks under there. They're worried. Look, I'm an open water international diver. I've swum with sharks. I understand. But the impact is becoming profound in terms of climate change, and we can't stop that. And the government, they're trying to do, I'm not going both, I'm talking that, what do you expect them to do? Just...
Good.
Yeah, and
the
no
gist.
one is arguing that the government should do nothing in the face of it. We've said yes to drones, we've said yes to smart drum lines, and I think Hannah made a really critical point about personal deterrent devices. And if I was an ocean swimmer, I'm at Sydney University, one of my staff said, what do? I've got a 13-year-old son who likes to spearfish. I said, personal deterrent device.
Got another question here. We've got 6 minutes left.
I'll try not to use the whole 6 minutes, but I've got a lot of things to say. Statistically,
Keep it brief and with a question mark at the end. Thanks.
I'm a spear fisherman too, and I'm most likely to get attacked by a shark. I think that I want to see nets removed, But I also think that if we rush to smart drum lines as the solution, I think there's been a lot of endorsement of them as a solution. We'll be having this conversation in 10, 20, 30 years' time about removing them because seals get caught on them and because the contractors kill the shark sometimes and they don't need to. And so I think that we need it's good to hear other solutions put forward today, but I would really hesitate the people in this room to jump to smart drum lines as the solution to shark mitigation.
Interesting. And do you have a question?
Yeah, I also think, what do we do about the media? Because politicians they don't care about 70% of this room. They care about Channel 9 News saying, you're responsible for for this shark attack happening because you removed nets.
Important question.
I did do you mind if I do like 10 seconds on this? So I did a study that was published in the journal Biology last year looking at the way the New York Times reports on shark bites. They say attack just as many times, but now they say bite as many times as they say attack. So the language globally is changing. So I met with John West about 14 years ago, and we had lunch, and I said, you need to change the name of the Australian shark attack file. And he said, okay, you convinced me. And he changed the name. Now it's the Shark Incidents Database. So, like, change can happen.
Hannah.
And also on the media, we go to the media when we see footage of other animals being caught in shark nets. So I spoke about the dolphin that was caught in Thurl the other week. We sent that out to the media. I know the ABC Illawarra ran a few radio stories on it, and I've done interviews on 7 News when a seal was caught off Bondi. So we can also use the media to have the conversation about what else and what are the main animals being caught in shark nets and start the conversation from there.
And that's what we're doing right now because we're recording it for the ABC. Yay. I'm going to take these 2 questions in a row, so keep them really brief. We've got about 1.5 minutes left.
Hi, thank you so much for your incredible discussion. I'm Taylor, I'm from the Sunshine Coast and I'm 15 years old. And I was wondering, what can kids do to support the removal and replacement of the shark control program?
Love the question. And you've got one too?
My question is about the timeline. This is not a new line of questioning. These debates about shark nets have been in progress for over a decade. What will it take for us to actually see a result and the removal? In what sort of timeline might be realistic?
Thank you so much. And they're the final 2 questions. Go for it, panel. Wrap it up.
I'll take Taylor's question. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's like Hannah said, it's about education. I mean, kids here learn about rips and they learn about snakes and they learn about spiders and all those things, but having some of that shark education would be really, really great. I know there's a hesitancy to talk about sharks in schools because incidents can be so traumatic and so shocking and have such an impact on people, but talking about it would be the best thing. And so getting some of those, asking their teachers about it, getting those programs into schools, just having chats with their parents and their friends and talking about what things can work and what don't and what impact they have on the ocean is going to go a long way.
And maybe proposing project ideas, talking to your teacher and saying, can we do some marine science-based projects? Maybe you could get, Sunshine Coast, you have some great marine biologists up that way. They are always dead keen to go to schools and talk to classrooms. Big time. They are great public communicators. And who's a marine biologist in the room? Yeah, I just know so many great marine biologists in Australia are so keen to do public communication work and especially with young people. So maybe you could pair up in that way too. Yeah.
A quick note on that as well. I think it answers both questions. Like we've said, this needs political will to get the nets out. So speak to your local councils, speak to your local MPs, write to them, sign petitions that support the removal of the nets, because the bigger the groundswell behind this to get the nets removed from the community, we've already got the community's sentiment data that we don't want them. So just keep that up and keep the conversations going and keep lobbying.
And you can tell your local council you will only swim at unnetted beaches. Like if we made that collective decision and we said that we will not stop swimming at the beaches that kill sharks, kill dolphins, kill turtles, and don't protect us, that's quite a powerful statement.
Steve Pearce.
I don't know about swimming at unnetted beaches, but I would say the final comment here, and I gave the disclaimer before, our interaction with the Department of Primary Industries, I don't think they shy away from the statistics. bycatch within the nets, and it's openly available, and there's some great people that actually are focusing on this. So again, with being apolitical, I'd probably just say lean into what Hannah said and what Chris said, if you want to make your voice heard. But I just think it's been a fabulous conversation here this morning. It's been really great to be involved in it.
Thank you all to our wonderful panellists. I'm particularly impressed that you all turned up on Sunday morning. Now go and no, actually you've got to stay around because we've got lots more presentations, and I'm doing 2 more sessions in a row, but we've got some lovely shorter sessions in between those two right throughout the day. Can't wait. Please thank Lawrence Chlebeck, Stephen Pearce, Chris Pepin-Neff and Hannah Tait.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Ocean Ideas. Please make sure to share it with your networks and help us in our mission to turn ripples of action into waves of change for our blue planet.